All right, continuing our conversation, this time focus on Georgia, the Honorable Stacey Abrams.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I want to frame this in a specific way. Georgia has 31% African American population, 9% Latino, 3.5% Asian American. So we're 43.5% of the population. But in terms of voting strength, African Americans vote about 30% of the electorate. The Latino population votes at about 1.5%, and the Asian American population votes at 1.3%. So we underperform every single election. If we were to harness the existing voting strength, we would win every single statewide seat every single time. To put it in context, President Obama lost Georgia by 204,000 votes. The statewide race between the governors in 2010, the Republican won by 258,000 votes, and President Obama lost by 304,000 in 2010, which was the worst year for Democrats in the history of the state. That was the year I got to be leader. I try not to tie those two things together in my psyche. But what it signals is that when we underperform, the entire state changes. And we saw more aggressive conservative legislation. We saw rollbacks of rights for women. Policies change. And the challenge that we have is that we have a gap in registration. We have a gap in turnout. And then we have a gap in expectation. And that's the most dangerous gap that we have. You can solve the registration issue. We have 800,000 unregistered African American, Latino, and Asian voters. In the last decade, between 2000 and 2010, 1.5 million people moved into Georgia, the vast majority of which were people of color. 1.5 million. We have 833,000 unregistered African American, Latino, and Asian voters. And in a runoff, in a midterm election, we have a drop-off from the presidential year of more than 600,000 voters. 600,000 people who just stay home. That's our fault. And it's our fault because we have, and by us I mean everybody in this room, including me, we have great conversations about registration. We have great conversations about turnout. What we do not talk about is what we're supposed to do the day after. This is a day after problem. If politicians are not held accountable for their work the day after, you will never get that 600,000 people to turn out. You'll never get those 833,000 people to register. And the challenge is for the 600,000 people, what they know about politics in America is that the president's at the top of the ticket, so if you vote for him, things should change. And what happens is when the world doesn't change, because we don't have enough Mark Tacanos in Congress, when the world doesn't change because we don't have good governors, when the world doesn't change, they don't come back. So they don't vote in that next off-year election. But the off-year elections are really strategically designed to screw you over. Excuse my language.
That is so good when you said it.
Sorry.
That's so true.
But that's what they're designed to do. They are designed to, it's like having the opening act happens in the midterm election. And no one cares about the opening act. But people love to see the main thing. So we all turn out for the presidential election, and we never show up for the midterm. But the midterm is where decisions get made. When Congress is unable to act, decisions get made by state legislatures, by governors, by school board members, by county commissioners, by city council members. And they get elected usually in off-year elections. We can't change that until we start showing up at those off-year elections. And so the mission that I have as minority leader is twofold. One is to take back the House. I believe it can be done. I know it can be done. Unfortunately, Steve has seen a 30-page deck that I've put together explaining step by step and who we're going to go after and how we're going to do it. But it can be done. We can change Georgia and we can take the House. But we also have to take the governor's mansion. We have to take the U.S. Senate. We have to demonstrate that there is some connectivity between the people elected and the work that gets done. But when you're in a minority state, when you're in the minority in a state, it's difficult to show affirmative change. But we know how it can be done because if you look at what the Republicans did from the 1970s through 1992, 1994, when the Republican Revolution happened, a lot of that happened in Georgia. Ralph Reed showed us what to do. We just have to do it in reverse. But what he did was stop talking about these high-level issues, and he went door to door to people and created what he called the Christian Coalition. He convinced poor white people that their souls mattered more than their pocketbooks, and that government could do nothing for their pocketbooks, but if they were to vote with him, their souls would be saved. So when we talk about, oh, they vote against their interest, no, they don't. They just prioritize their moral interest above their economic interest. We have to be willing to have the same conversation, but tie the two things together. We have to talk about values and opportunity, and we have to do it door to door. And that's the place where you start to pick up voters of color. In Georgia in particular, where we have one of the highest poverty rates in the nation, we also just got lauded as one of the best places to do business. Yeah, we're great to do business in because we won't charge you any taxes, we won't hold you accountable, you can pollute if you want to, you can do all kinds of fun things in Georgia. And we became very business friendly at the expense of being very worker unfriendly. Those are conversations that have to be had door to door, and that's the work that we're doing on the House caucus side. As the House Democratic Caucus, we have contested races year after year, and we're focusing on the bread and butter issues. We talk about economic security, educational opportunity, and shared responsibility. And we focus on really small policies because we need people to connect the dots. We cannot assume that because Freedom Summer resonates with us so strongly that the average voter gets what that means. It was 50 years ago. What they need to understand today is that your freedom comes not just in the summer during primaries, but it comes in the fall during midterm elections. And then we have to hold the people who get elected accountable for the work they do. I'll wrap this up by saying I think that there are three opportunities that we have. The first and foremost is voter registration. There is a project that I'm part of in Georgia called the New Georgia Project. Our aim is to register at least 100,000, 120,000 voters this year. That can change an election in Georgia. We want to get those voters registered. But the next part of that is we have to get those voters educated. Civic education is not a part of our conversation in America anymore. And so people don't actually know what they're voting for. As part of the New Georgia Project, we did some deep research to understand why, if you're an African-American man who didn't vote for Barack Obama in 2008, 2012, why not? And the answers were, one, they were afraid of voting. They don't understand it. All they hear about is voter intimidation, and they think that that means you shouldn't vote. Or if you're Latino, you're afraid that by showing your ID, and if you're in a voter ID state, that what that's going to mean is that you could possibly harm the rest of your family, so you don't bother. So we have to begin by making sure people understand how to vote. The second is we have to connect the dots for the issues that they're voting for. Let them know if you vote for a state senator, this is what that state senator does. If you vote for a congressman, this is what the congressperson does. And if you're voting for the US Senate, this is what it means if you want our president to be successful. And the third thing is that we have to do this every day. This is not an election year issue. 2014 is critical, but 2015 is also really important, and 2016 and 2017, 2018, because my focus is on 2021. I know Representative Fudge said we can't look past 2014. I'm focusing here, but my eye is on 2021 because when we do redistricting in 2021, if we have not changed the electorate, especially in the South, we will have a majority-minority population that is governed by a minority-white conservative coalition. And that's the most dangerous precedent that we could possibly set for the South in the next 20 years.